Colorado Territory, 1875. The morning sun crested over the rugged peaks of the San Juan Mountains, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek. Asher Owens watched his breath fog in the crisp autumn air as he led his prized Appaloosa stallion, Thunder, toward the Mercantile. The horse's coat gleamed like polished marble with spots dark as coal dust, catching admiring glances from passers-by. "That's some fine horse flesh, Owens," called Hank Wilson from his place on the bench outside the barber shop. Asher nodded, but didn't slow his stride. At 25, he'd learned that a man's worth in these parts was measured by three things: his gun, his horse, and his solitude. The last had become his shield. For years, working cattle drives from Texas to Colorado had taught him that attachment was a weakness the frontier punished swiftly. Men with sweethearts back home made mistakes, took foolish risks to finish jobs faster. Graves dotted the cattle trails, monuments to men who'd been distracted by dreams of reunion. "No room for sentiment out here," Asher muttered to Thunder, patting the horse's powerful neck. "Just you and me, boy. That's all a cowboy needs." The stallion had been his companion through blizzards, river crossings, and more than one running gunfight with rustlers. Worth more than a year's wages, Thunder represented everything Asher had worked for since leaving home at 17: respect, freedom, and the ability to ride away from trouble at a moment's notice. Silver Creek was supposed to be a 2-day stop to resupply before heading to the Daniels Ranch, where he'd signed on for winter work. The settlement had grown in the years since he'd passed through, prosperity evident in the freshly painted buildings and new construction at the far end of town. As Asher approached the Mercantile, he spotted Mr. Kirkwood's wagon being unloaded, the merchant directing two young men hauling crates of supplies. Kirkwood had the largest store between Denver and Santa Fe, a fact he never let anyone forget. "Careful with those glass goods," Kirkwood shouted. "That's fine crystal from back east, worth more than your yearly wage." Asher tied Thunder to the hitching post and stepped onto the wooden porch just as a young woman emerged from the store, ledger in hand. The world seemed to still for a moment. Felicity Kirkwood stood framed in the doorway, 19 years old and more striking than Asher remembered from his last visit. Her chestnut hair was gathered in a sensible bun, though a few strands had escaped to frame a face that made him think of the porcelain dolls in the store window. She wore a practical blue cotton dress with a crisp white collar, but it was her eyes, direct and intelligent, that caught and held his attention. "Father, the Hammond order is still short the bolts of calico they requested," she said, oblivious to Asher's presence until she nearly collided with him. "Pardon me," she said, stepping back with a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Miss Kirkwood," Asher managed, removing his hat. "No pardon necessary." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Mr. Owens, isn't it? You purchased supplies last spring." He nodded, surprised she remembered him among the countless travelers passing through. "Your memory serves you well, Miss Kirkwood." "Felicity keeps the books," her father called over his shoulder. "Remembers every customer and every penny they've spent." There was pride in his voice, though he didn't break from his inventory supervision. Asher followed Felicity into the store, suddenly conscious of the trail dust coating his clothes. The Mercantile smelled of coffee, leather, and new fabric, comforts he allowed himself to enjoy only briefly between jobs. "What brings you back to Silver Creek?" she asked, moving behind the long wooden counter. "Winter work at the Daniels spread," Asher replied, placing his hat on the counter. "Just stopping for supplies." She nodded, pencil poised over her ledger. "What will you need, Mr. Owens?" The ordinary transaction felt somehow different under her steady gaze. As he listed his requirements, coffee, ammunition, tobacco, he found himself straightening his posture, moderating his usually terse manner. "That horse of yours is magnificent," she commented as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "I've seen many fine animals come through town, but few that match him." Pride warmed Asher's voice. "Thunder's one of a kind. Saved my life more than once." "I imagine there are many stories there," she said with genuine interest. Before he could respond, the door burst open, and 3 men entered. Their fine clothes marked them as city folk, their confident stride as men of means. The eldest, gray-haired and portly, approached Kirkwood directly. "Mr. Kirkwood, George Fallon from the Rocky Mountain Railroad. These are my associates." The introductions continued, But Asher's attention remained on Felicity, whose demeanor had subtly changed, her shoulders tense, her smile forced as she nodded politely to the visitors. The railroad men's arrival transformed the atmosphere in the store. Kirkwood beamed, ushering them toward his small office in the back. "Felicity, bring coffee for our guests." As she prepared the tray, Asher gathered his purchases. "Railroad coming to Silver Creek?" he asked quietly. Her expression clouded. "Father has been negotiating for months. The depot will be built just east of town. That'll change things around here," Asher observed. "Some changes may not be for the better," she replied, voice barely audible as she lifted the coffee tray. Asher paused at the door, watching as she disappeared into her father's office. Something in her restrained manner stirred his curiosity, but he shook it off. Silver Creek's future and Felicity Kirkwood's concerns were none of his business. A cowboy passed through. He didn't put down roots. Yet as he untied Thunder and mounted, he found himself glancing back at the mercantile with an unfamiliar reluctance to ride away. The following day brought an unexpected downpour, turning the streets of Silver Creek into shallow rivers of mud. Asher sat in the town's only hotel dining room, nursing a cup of coffee while rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat hanging near the door. "Looks like you'll be delayed getting out to the Daniels place," the hotel owner commented as he refilled Asher's cup. "Creek will be too high to cross safely for at least a day after this lets up." Asher nodded, hiding his frustration. Idle time in town meant spending money he'd rather save, but rushing across a flooded creek was foolishness that had drowned many an impatient traveler. The dining room door opened, admitting a gust of wet wind and Felicity Kirkwood, her shawl doing little to protect her from the downpour. She spotted Asher immediately, hesitating before approaching his table. "Mr. Owens, I'm glad to find you still in town." Her voice carried an urgency that piqued his interest. "Might I have a word?" He gestured to the empty chair across from him, noting the way water beaded on her eyelashes. "Terrible day to be out, Miss Kirkwood. I had little choice." She glanced around, lowering her voice. "I need to ask a favor, one I have no right to request, but I find myself without alternatives." Asher leaned forward. "What kind of favor?" "I need to reach the Harvey homestead 10 miles north, today. My father believes I'm delivering medicines to Mrs. Sanderson across town." The request surprised him. The creek's rising fast. It'd be dangerous crossing, especially with a wagon. "Not with a wagon," she clarified. "On horseback. I can ride, Mr. Owens, quite well actually." "And why would Mr. Kirkwood object to you visiting the Harveys?" Asher asked, curiosity overcoming his usual reluctance to involve himself in others' affairs. Felicity's hands tightened around her dampened shawl. "Because Sarah Harvey was my mother's dearest friend, and she opposes the railroad's current planned route, which would require her land." She met his gaze directly. "Father has forbidden any contact. He fears it will complicate his negotiations with Mr. Fallon." The pieces fell into place. "And you're bringing her information?" She nodded. "Documents that could help her case. Papers proving her mineral rights extend beyond what the railroad has acknowledged." Asher studied her, recognizing the determination in her eyes and the danger in what she proposed. "Your father would be furious if he discovered this." "He would," she agreed without hesitation. "But this is about right and wrong, Mr. Owens. Sarah Harvey has lived on that land for 30 years. The railroad can adjust their route, despite what they claim." Her conviction stirred something in Asher, an admiration he hadn't felt in years. Still, the rational part of him resisted. "Why me? Why not ask someone else?" "Because you're passing through," she said simply. "You have no ties to Silver Creek, no business relationships my father could damage. And," she added with the ghost of a smile, "you have the finest horse I've seen, one that could make the journey safely even in these conditions." The mention of Thunder brought Asher back to reality. "I can't risk my horse on this errand, Miss Kirkwood. Thunder's more than transportation. He's my livelihood, my safety on the trail." Disappointment shadowed her face, but she nodded. "I understand." It was presumptuous to ask. She stood, adjusting her sodden shawl. "Please forget I mentioned it." As she turned to leave, Asher found himself speaking against his better judgment. "I could escort you on a different mount. The livery might have a steady horse available." Her expression brightened momentarily before falling again. "I tried already. The livery owner is one of Father's closest friends. He'd report my request immediately." Asher watched her walk to the door, conflict churning inside him. Everything he believed about survival in the West told him to stay out of it, that entanglements led to danger, that a cowboy minded his own business. Yet the sight of her standing there, small but determined against forces so much larger than herself, stirred something he'd long thought dormant. "Miss Kirkwood," he called, rising from his chair. "Be at the south end of town in 1 hour. Bring those papers, and wear practical riding clothes if you have them." The smile she gave him seemed to illuminate the dreary room. "Thank you, Mr. Owens. I won't forget this." After she departed, Asher sat heavily, already questioning his decision. "This is how men get themselves killed," he muttered into his coffee cup, "getting involved in other people's troubles." Yet as he paid for his meal and stepped out into the rain, he couldn't entirely regret his choice. Some principles, it seemed, ran deeper than his hard-learned lessons about isolation. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle when Asher met Felicity at the appointed place, leading Thunder. She appeared wearing a divided riding skirt beneath her coat, her hair secured tightly against the elements. "You're risking a lot," she said as she approached, eyes fixed on the magnificent Appaloosa. "So are you," Asher replied, offering his hand to help her mount. "Your father would likely do more than yell if he discovered this adventure." She settled into the saddle with practiced ease. "My father sees me as a bookkeeper and someday a suitable wife for a business associate. My mother raised me to believe I could be more." Asher mounted behind her, acutely aware of her proximity as he reached around to take the reins. Thunder shifted beneath the unfamiliar weight of 2 riders, but remained steady. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman," he commented as they set off at a careful pace, avoiding the main street. "She was," Felicity replied softly. "She died 3 years ago. Consumption." The simple statement contained volumes of loss, reminding Asher that everyone carried invisible burdens across this frontier. "I'm sorry." They rode in silence for a time, Thunder picking his way carefully along the muddy trail leading north from town. The rain continued steadily, soaking through Asher's coat despite his slicker. "The creek crossing is ahead," he said eventually. "Water's higher than I'd like." Felicity tensed against him. "Can we make it across?" Asher studied the swollen creek, normally a gentle flow now transformed into a churning brown current. "Thunder can handle it, but it won't be pleasant." She nodded. "I trust your judgment." That simple declaration unsettled him more than the treacherous crossing ahead. Trust was a rare commodity on the frontier, often misplaced and exploited. Yet here was this young woman, placing her safety in his hands without hesitation. Asher guided Thunder into the creek carefully, feeling the powerful animal adjust to the current. Halfway across, the water reached the stallion's chest, forcing him to swim briefly before finding footing on the far bank. Throughout the crossing, Felicity remained silent, gripping the saddle horn tightly, but showing no panic. "You handled that well," Asher observed as they continued north, both of them dripping. "Most folks would have screamed or grabbed at me." "Screaming helps nothing," she replied pragmatically. "And I suspected grabbing you might startle either you or your horse." A laugh escaped him, surprising them both. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Miss Kirkwood." The journey continued through increasingly rugged terrain, the rain gradually tapering off as they approached the Harvey homestead. The small cabin came into view nestled against a hillside, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Sarah Harvey proved to be a silver-haired woman with the weathered face of someone who had faced the frontier's challenges and endured. She embraced Felicity with tears in her eyes. "You're the image of your mother," she said, ushering them inside the warm cabin. "I feared I wouldn't see you again before they forced us out." As the women reviewed the documents Felicity had brought, Asher stood awkwardly by the door, feeling like an intruder in this reunion. Mrs. Harvey's husband Jacob joined them, his handshake firm despite his advanced years. "You've done a brave thing bringing her here," the old man said quietly. "Kirkwood's not a man who forgives those who cross him." Asher shifted uncomfortably. "Just doing a favor for a lady in need." Jacob's knowing smile suggested he saw more than Asher wanted to reveal. "That stallion outside. That's Appaloosa royalty if I ever saw it. Must have cost you plenty." "Every cent I had, plus 2 years of savings," Asher admitted. The old man nodded. "A man's horse tells you much about his character. You take care of what matters." The conversation with the Harveys extended longer than Asher had anticipated. Their situation became clear. The railroad wanted a direct route through their property for its convenience, ignoring viable alternatives that would preserve the homestead where they'd raised children and buried 2 infants on the hillside. Felicity's documents revealed that the mineral rights the Harveys held extended beyond what the railroad had acknowledged in their official filings, rights that would significantly complicate any forced acquisition. This might be enough leverage to force them to consider the southern route, Jacob said, hope kindling in his tired eyes. As the afternoon waned, Asher grew increasingly anxious. We should start back, Miss Kirkwood. Your father will be expecting you. The return journey began under clearing skies, though the mud slowed their progress considerably. They were still 5 miles from town when Thunder pulled up short, ears pricked forward in alarm. What is it? Felicity whispered. Asher scanned the trail ahead, noting fresh hoofprints cutting across their path. Riders. Recent. And they're not trying to hide their tracks. A sense of foreboding settled over him as they continued, Thunder's stride tense beneath them. The creek crossing appeared ahead, the water level already receding but still dangerous. As they approached, 3 riders emerged from the tree line on the far bank. That's Walter Simmons, Felicity said, her voice tight. My father's foreman. Asher assessed the situation quickly. Simmons and his companions blocked the crossing, their posture unmistakably confrontational. Miss Kirkwood, Simmons called across the water. Your father's been searching for you since noon. He's mighty displeased to hear you've been seen riding out with Owens here. We're just returning from a ride, Asher replied evenly. I'll see Miss Kirkwood safely home. Simmons spat into the mud. Mr. Kirkwood gave specific instructions to bring his daughter back immediately, alone. Felicity's hands trembled slightly, though her voice remained steady. Please tell my father I'll explain everything when I return. That's not how this works, miss, Simmons responded, his tone hardening. Your father says you've got papers that don't belong to you. Says they need to be returned before any damage is done. Asher felt Felicity stiffen against him. He knows, she whispered. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. 3 men against 1, with Felicity caught in the middle. Asher's hand drifted toward the rifle in his saddle scabbard, though he knew drawing it would only escalate the confrontation. What now? Felicity asked quietly. Asher surveyed their surroundings, mind racing. There's another crossing 2 miles upstream. Harder to find unless you know these lands. Simmons knows every trail in the county, she countered. But Thunder's faster than their horses, especially in this mud. Asher gathered the reins. Hold tight. Without warning, he wheeled the Appaloosa around and spurred him into a gallop away from the creek. Shouts erupted behind them as Simmons and his men scrambled to pursue. Thunder's powerful stride ate up the distance, his sure footing finding purchase where lesser horses would falter. Asher guided him off the main trail onto a game path that wound through dense underbrush, forcing their pursuers to slow or risk injury to their mounts. They're falling behind, Felicity called over her shoulder, clinging to the saddle horn. Not for long, Asher replied grimly. Once we hit open country, they'll spot us again. The alternate crossing appeared ahead, the creek narrower but swifter at this point. Without hesitation, Asher guided Thunder into the rushing water. The stallion fought against the current, muscles straining beneath them until they emerged on the far bank, muddy but safe. There, Felicity pointed toward a rocky outcropping that offered shelter and concealment. We could wait there until dark. Asher considered their options. Your father will have men watching all approaches to town. Then we don't go to town, she said with sudden resolution. We go to the railroad camp. The railroad? The very people your father's working with. She nodded. Mr. Fallon is a businessman. If he learns the Harveys have legitimate mineral rights that could tie up construction in years of legal battles, he might pressure my father to consider the southern route. Her eyes held a fierce determination. It's our only chance to help the Harveys and resolve this without further confrontation. Against his better judgment, Asher found himself agreeing. They altered course toward the railroad camp several miles east of Silver Creek, Thunder's endurance tested by the difficult terrain and double burden. The camp appeared as dusk settled, a collection of tents and temporary structures bustling with activity. Their arrival caused an immediate stir, mud-covered and breathless atop the magnificent Appaloosa. George Fallon emerged from the largest tent, recognition and surprise crossing his face. Miss Kirkwood? What in heaven's name? Mr. Fallon, I must speak with you urgently. Felicity interrupted, sliding from Thunder's back with Asher's assistance. It concerns the Harvey property and information that affects your construction plans. The railroad man glanced between them, noting their disheveled appearance and the quality of Asher's horse. Come inside, both of you. Though I suspect your father will have much to say about this visit. Inside Fallon's tent, Felicity presented her case with surprising eloquence, laying out the documents proving the Harveys' mineral rights and the legal complications they presented. The southern route adds only 7 miles to your line, she concluded. A small price to avoid years of legal battles that would delay construction entirely. Fallon studied the papers with a businessman's calculating eye. These rights are indeed more extensive than our survey indicated. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. Your father assured me the Harveys would be amenable to relocation. My father was mistaken, Felicity stated firmly. The tent flap flew open, revealing an irate Edmund Kirkwood flanked by Simmons and another man. There you are, he thundered, face flushed with anger. His gaze fell on the papers spread across Fallon's desk, and his expression darkened further. What have you done, Felicity? Asher stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself between Felicity and her father. Mr. Kirkwood, your daughter was only. I know exactly what she was doing. Kirkwood cut him off. Undermining months of negotiations and betraying her family for strangers. He turned to Fallon. Whatever she's told you, I can explain. I believe explanations are certainly in order, Fallon agreed, his tone measured. These mineral rights documents present significant complications I was not made aware of. What followed was a tense negotiation that stretched into the night. Kirkwood's initial fury gave way to grudging pragmatism as Fallon made it clear that the southern route now appeared the more expedient option. Throughout the discussion, Asher remained silent but vigilant, aware that his presence was barely tolerated. When Felicity finally emerged from the tent, exhaustion lined her face, but triumph brightened her eyes. The southern route will be recommended to the board, she told him quietly. The Harveys can keep their home. The victory felt hollow, however, as Kirkwood approached them, his anger now cold and controlled. You've had your way, Felicity. Now it's time to return home. He turned to Asher, contempt evident in his expression. As for you, Cowboy, consider yourself unwelcome in Silver Creek. I suggest you move on immediately. Father, Mr. Owens only helped me because I don't care about his reasons, Kirkwood interrupted. Actions have consequences. He's made an enemy he can't afford. The threat hung in the air between them, its implications clear. In a town where Kirkwood controlled commerce and held sway with most businesses, Asher would find no welcome. I understand, Mr. Kirkwood, Asher replied evenly. I'll be gone by morning. Felicity's distress was evident as her father led her toward his waiting wagon. I'm sorry, she called back to Asher. This isn't what I intended. Asher watched them depart, conflicting emotions churning within him. The rational part of his mind reminded him this was exactly why a cowboy stayed uninvolved. Entanglements led to complications, complications to danger. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret helping her. As he led an exhausted Thunder toward the livery to collect his belongings, Asher reflected that he'd lost more than just his welcome in Silver Creek. Something had awakened in him during those hours with Felicity Kirkwood, something he deliberately kept dormant for years. Dawn broke clear and cold over Silver Creek as Asher prepared Thunder for departure. The town was just stirring to life, merchants opening shops, the smell of breakfast fires carrying on the crisp air. Heading out early, aren't you? The livery owner leaned against the stable door, his expression guarded. Heard there was some trouble yesterday. Asher continued cinching his saddle. No trouble. Just time to move on. The man nodded sagely. Kirkwood's got a long memory for slights. Probably wise to put some distance between you and Silver Creek. That's my intention, Asher replied, securing his bedroll. He led Thunder out into the yard just as a carriage approached, pulling up short at the livery entrance. Felicity Kirkwood stepped down, her expression determined despite the shadows beneath her eyes suggesting a sleepless night. Mr. Owens, she called. I hoped to catch you before you left. Asher's pulse quickened despite his efforts to maintain his composure. Miss Kirkwood, I'm surprised your father allowed this visit. He didn't, she replied, glancing over her shoulder. I have perhaps 10 minutes before he discovers I'm gone. She approached, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. For your journey. Asher accepted it awkwardly. You didn't need to. It's the least I can do after what happened, she interrupted. My father's anger will fade in time, but I wanted to thank you properly for your help. The sincerity in her voice made him uncomfortable. I only did what seemed right. Felicity stepped closer, lowering her voice. Few men would have. Most would have considered the potential cost and refused. Maybe most men are wiser than me, Asher replied with a half-smile. Her answering smile transformed her face, bringing a warmth to her eyes that caught at something in Asher's chest. Or perhaps wisdom isn't always found in caution. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Asher found himself studying the details of her face, the slight upturn of her nose, the constellation of freckles across her cheeks, the determination in the set of her jaw. I should go, he said finally, reluctance coloring his voice. Your father made his feelings clear. Felicity nodded, her expression falling. Where will you head? Daniel's ranch is planned. After that, wherever the work takes me. Always moving on, she observed, a question in her tone. It's the cowboy way, Asher replied automatically, though the words felt hollow for the first time in years. As he mounted Thunder, Felicity stepped back, composing herself. Safe travels, Mr. Owens. Asher tipped his hat, unable to find adequate words for the unexpected emotions coursing through him. As he rode out of Silver Creek, he fought the urge to look back, focusing instead on the trail ahead and the familiar rhythm of Thunder's stride beneath him. 10 miles outside of town, he finally opened Felicity's package. Inside, he found a small leather-bound journal and a letter sealed with wax. The journal contained detailed maps of the region, clearly drawn by someone with intimate knowledge of the territory. The letter, written in Felicity's neat hand, expressed her gratitude more fully and included a surprising revelation. She would be traveling to Denver the following month to visit her aunt, should he find himself in the city. For the first time in years, Asher felt the stirring of possibility, a future beyond the next cattle drive or ranch job. The sensation was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. Winter descended on Colorado with merciless swiftness. At the Daniels Ranch, Asher threw himself into work, taking on the most difficult tasks to keep his mind occupied. The bitter cold and long nights provided ample time for reflection, however, and his thoughts returned repeatedly to Felicity Kirkwood. You've been mighty distracted lately, observed Frank Daniels one evening as they sat by the bunkhouse fire. Not like you to miss a shot at that coyote yesterday. Asher stared into the flames. Just tired, I guess. Frank chuckled. Been ranching 40 years, son. I know the look of a man troubled by a woman, not tiredness. The perceptive comment caught Asher off guard. It's not that simple. Never is, Frank agreed. But winter doesn't last forever. Spring brings new possibilities. Those words stayed with Asher through the harsh months that followed. When the first Chinook winds of February brought temporary reprieve from winter's grip, he made his decision. Approaching Frank with his plan, he was surprised by the older man's knowing smile. Been expecting this, Frank said. You're welcome back for spring roundup if things don't work out. Asher rode into Silver Creek with trepidation, uncertain of his reception after 3 months' absence. The town had changed subtly. New construction near the planned depot, more activity in the streets, a sense of prosperity fueled by the coming railroad. At the mercantile, he hesitated before entering, steeling himself for confrontation. Instead, he found an unfamiliar clerk behind the counter. Can I help you, sir? I'm looking for Mr. Kirkwood, Asher said, removing his hat. The young man gestured toward the back office. In there with the railroad men. Again, Asher approached the office door, hearing raised voices within. He recognized Fallon's distinctive tone, now edged with frustration. The board has approved the southern route, Kirkwood. The documents are signed. Attempting to revive the northern option now will only delay construction further. There must be some way to persuade them, came Kirkwood's reply. The Harvey woman is being unreasonable in her demands. The demands are perfectly legal given her mineral rights, Fallon countered. Rights you failed to disclose initially. We're fortunate she's willing to negotiate access for the southern route at all. The door opened abruptly, revealing a flustered Kirkwood face to face with Asher. Recognition flashed in the merchant's eyes, followed by cold anger. What are you doing here? He demanded. I thought I made myself clear. Before Asher could respond, Fallon appeared behind Kirkwood. Ah, Mr. Owens, isn't it? The young man with the remarkable Appaloosa. Mr. Fallon, Asher acknowledged with a nod. Is there something you need, Cowboy? Kirkwood's tone made the question sound like a threat. Asher met his gaze steadily. I came to speak with you, sir. About your daughter. The merchant's expression hardened further. My daughter is in Denver, visiting her aunt. And her future is none of your concern. With respect, Mr. Kirkwood, I believe it is. Asher found courage in the months of reflection that had led him to this moment. I've come to ask your permission to court her properly. Kirkwood's incredulous laugh held no humor. Court her? A saddle tramp with nothing to his name? Felicity is destined for someone with prospects, not a drifter who'll be moving on with the next cattle drive. The dismissal stung, but Asher held his ground. I understand your concerns, sir. But I'm not asking to marry her today. Just the chance to prove myself worthy of her consideration. Impossible, Kirkwood declared. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business to conclude. As the merchant turned away, Fallon studied Asher with unexpected interest. That's quite a horse you have, Mr. Owens. Breeding stock like that is valuable in this territory. Thunder's not for sale, Asher replied automatically. Everything has its price, Fallon observed. Especially when a man wants something badly enough. The railroad man's words echoed in Asher's mind as he left the mercantile. Outside, he patted Thunder's neck, the stallion nickering in response. What do you think, boy? Is she worth it? The answer came not from the horse, but from within, a certainty that had been building since that rain-soaked ride months ago. For the first time in years, something mattered more than the freedom of the trail. Asher's return to the mercantile the following morning caused a stir among the townsfolk. He had groomed Thunder to a gleaming perfection, the Appaloosa's distinctive coat drawing admiring glances as they made their way down the main street. Kirkwood was checking inventory when Asher entered. His expression soured immediately. I thought I made myself clear yesterday. You did, Asher agreed. Which is why I've come with a proposition. Kirkwood's eyebrow raised slightly. I'm listening. Thunder, Asher stated simply. In exchange for your blessing to court Miss Felicity. The merchant's skepticism gave way to disbelief. You'd trade your horse, that horse, for permission to court my daughter? I would. Kirkwood circled Asher slowly, assessing him with new eyes. Why? That animal is worth more than most men earn in 2 years. Because some things matter more than possessions, Asher replied. Even the most valuable ones. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Kirkwood's face. And if she refuses you? You'd have given up your livelihood for nothing. That's my risk to take, Asher said steadily. But I believe some risks are worth taking. The merchant fell silent, genuine confusion replacing his previous contempt. After a long moment, he spoke. My Felicity has always had a stubborn streak. Gets it from her mother. His expression softened fractionally at the mention of his late wife. Eleanor would say I'm being a fool to stand in the way of someone willing to sacrifice so much. Asher waited, hope kindling despite his efforts to remain pragmatic. Keep your horse, Owens, Kirkwood said finally. A man without means to support my daughter is no use to her, regardless of grand gestures. Disappointment crashed through Asher, but before he could respond, Kirkwood continued. However, I may have a proposition of my own. The merchant stroked his beard thoughtfully. The railroad has purchased land for a way station between here and Denver. They're looking for someone to establish stock facilities, breeding horses specifically suited to our high country. Asher's confusion must have shown on his face, for Kirkwood elaborated. Fallon mentioned your horse specifically after you left yesterday. Said stock like that, managed by someone who clearly knows horseflesh, would be valuable to their operation. I'm no rancher, Asher objected. Just a hired hand. Every rancher starts somewhere, Kirkwood countered. Fallon's willing to provide the land and initial stock if you contribute that stallion to the breeding program and your expertise to the operation. He paused meaningfully. A man with a government contract and 50 acres might be considered a suitable prospect for my daughter, in time. The offer stunned Asher into momentary silence. It represented everything he'd never allowed himself to want. Land, purpose, roots, and the possibility of a future with Felicity. Why would you do this? He asked finally. You made your feelings about me clear. Kirkwood's expression remained unreadable. Let's say I recognize a sound investment when I see one. And a man willing to give up his most prized possession for a mere chance at courtship is either a fool or truly devoted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My Felicity deserves the latter. The terms were negotiated over the following days. Asher would retain ownership of Thunder, but commit him to the breeding program. The way station land would eventually transfer to his name after fulfilling the 5-year contract. Most importantly, Kirkwood would write to Felicity in Denver, informing her of the arrangement and Asher's intention to visit when the station construction began in March. As February gave way to March, Asher found himself watching the stagecoach road with increasing anticipation. Word had come that Felicity was returning to Silver Creek, her Denver visit cut short by news of the developments. When the stage finally appeared on the horizon, Asher stood waiting, Thunder saddled beside him. The stallion seemed to sense his anxiety, nudging his shoulder gently. "I know, boy," Asher murmured. "This changes everything for both of us." The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of dust. When the door opened and Felicity emerged, something in Asher's chest constricted. She stood for a moment, scanning the gathered crowd until her eyes found his. The smile that bloomed across her face held all the promise of spring after the longest winter. She approached steadily, her blue traveling dress swirling around her ankles. "Mr. Owens," she greeted him, her formal tone belied by the warmth in her eyes. "Miss Kirkwood," he replied, suddenly tongue-tied despite all the speeches he'd rehearsed. "My father wrote that you've accepted a position with the railroad," she said. "Quite a change for a man who once told me it's the cowboy way to keep moving." "Some things are worth stopping for," Asher replied, finding courage in her presence. "Some people, too." Felicity's expression softened. "I understand you offered to trade Thunder for permission to court me." She reached out to stroke the Appaloosa's nose. "That seems rather drastic." "It felt like a fair exchange at the time," Asher admitted. She studied him thoughtfully. "And now? Do you regret the decision since my father found another solution?" "No," Asher answered without hesitation. "I'd have made the trade 100 times over." Felicity stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Why?" The question demanded honesty Asher had never allowed himself to express. "Because I've spent years believing a man survives the frontier by avoiding attachment. That connections are vulnerabilities." He took a deep breath. "But these past months made me realize the real danger isn't in caring too much. It's in never caring at all." Her gloved hand touched his arm lightly. "And what is it you care about, Mr. Owens?" "You," he said simply. "Enough to trade everything I have for the chance to show you." The busy street around them seemed to fade as Felicity's smile widened. "Then I believe we have an understanding," she said softly. "Though I'm pleased Thunder remains yours. He's part of what makes you the man you are." "The man I'm becoming," Asher corrected gently. "If you'll help me figure out who that is." Her laughter, bright and genuine, washed over him like sunshine. "I believe that's what courtship is for, Mr. Owens." "Asher," he offered. "If we're to court properly, perhaps you might use my given name." "Asher," she repeated, the sound of his name on her lips sending warmth through him. "And I'm Felicity." As they walked together toward the mercantile, Thunder following patiently behind, Asher felt a profound shift, as if the world had rearranged itself around this new possibility. The frontier remained vast and often harsh, but no longer did it seem a place where love could not survive. Indeed, as Felicity's hand slipped into his, he understood that love might be the very thing that made survival worthwhile. Silver Creek, 1880. The way station bustled with activity as the afternoon stage prepared for departure. Passengers milled about, stretching their legs during the brief stop, while fresh horses were hitched to the coach. From the corral nearby came the thunder of hooves as a herd of young Appaloosas, all bearing Thunder's distinctive markings, were put through their paces by experienced handlers. Asher Owens leaned against the station's front porch, watching with pride as railroad representatives inspected the latest crop of horses. 5 years had transformed the empty parcel into a thriving operation, supplying mounts to the railroad, stage lines, and increasingly, wealthy ranchers seeking quality stock. "Mr. Fallon says this year's foals are the finest yet," came a familiar voice as Felicity joined him on the porch. Her simple calico dress couldn't disguise her advancing pregnancy, their second child due before winter arrived. Asher smiled, taking her hand. Thunder's bloodline grows stronger with each generation. Rather like the Owens family. She replied with a meaningful glance toward their 3-year-old daughter playing under the watchful eye of Sarah Harvey, who had become a regular visitor and surrogate grandmother. The elderly woman had become part of their extended family after the Harveys sold their homestead, on their own terms and for a handsome price, to enjoy their remaining years in comfort closer to town. Their land now housed the railroad's main depot, a compromise that had ultimately benefited all parties. "Father's coming for supper," Felicity reminded him. "He's bringing the final papers for the land transfer." Edmund Kirkwood had mellowed considerably over the years, especially after his first grandchild arrived. The successful partnership between his mercantile business and Asher's horse operation had proven lucrative for both, transforming initial reluctance into grudging respect and eventually genuine affection. 5 years, Asher mused. "Feels like yesterday I rode into Silver Creek with nothing but thunder and the clothes on my back. And now?" Felicity prompted, her eyes warm with invitation. Asher surveyed their domain, the sturdy house they'd built together, the thriving business, the community that had embraced them. In the corral, Thunder, now older but still majestic, grazed contentedly among his descendants. "Now I have everything I never knew to want," he answered, drawing her close. "And it all started with a rainy day and a merchant's daughter brave enough to ask a favor." Felicity's laugh sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. "And a cowboy willing to trade his prize horse for love. Best trade I never had to make," Asher replied, kissing her softly as their daughter ran toward them across the yard, her dark hair streaming behind her like a banner of their shared future. A future built on the understanding that sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from riding away, but from finding the courage to stay.